Okay, so the next stop is the elephant in the room. This is a tough topic because I think that everybody is really wanting to see things in a black and white, good, bad. Polarized, essentially. Everybody wants to be able to point at something and say, that's my problem. And I notice, as folks are working towards trying to unveil what's kind of gone wrong in society, in the world in general, or in their lives, it's pretty clear to me just watching it that everybody is wanting to say, this is the problem. This group, this way of thinking, these particular people, this party, this whatever. And here's the problem. If you look at this from the point of view of the hive-minded systemic issue, if there's a threat found in the body, it's attacked. So historically what I've seen is, just kind of looking back at all of it, whenever an organization or any group or any individual makes a move that would be a threat or takes a position that would be oppositional to this hive mind thinking, this oppressive type of thinking, this toxic way of thinking, it's fairly toxic way of thinking, it's like it registers in the system as a threat. And so what you'll find, I think, and you probably will find it in most of the organizations, is when you had an organization or any group that starts working towards the purpose of working inward or working on the self or trying to improve or trying to break free or trying to establish sovereignty or trying to reestablish the self or independent thinking, it starts to get attacked. And sometimes it's obvious and sometimes it's not so obvious. So typically the attack, it's from the inside out. So most of these groups, most of these affiliates, organizations, they may have started out well, but from what I can see, they get infiltrated from the inside out. And so it's hard and it's slow. It's slow. It's not typically very quick. Right now it's fast because the level of panic seems to be pretty high, or there seems to be a rush to the finish line for both sides. I'm not sure why there's a sense of expediency, but it seems to be quickening. But it's in our nature to be able to want to point at something and say, this is my problem. And so, one group saying, oh, it's Israel's the problem. Oh, Rothschilds are a problem. Oh, Democrats are the problem. Republicans are the problem. I could list, I don't know how many, all of them. A cabal is a problem. The secret society. The problem is that it didn't matter. Every one of those groups might have started out with good intentions, but from the inside out, it was just eaten away at. And you can kind of see how that happens if you were in a narcissistic relationship, because it started out well and it ended terribly. The empathetic, compassionate person goes into it with like the best of intentions. This is going to be the most beautiful life ever. We're going to live together. It's going to be great. We're going to have kids. We're going to have family. Everything's going to be wonderful. But that's not the intention of the other side. So I'm going to pose the concept to you to consider that the boogeyman you seek has infiltrated almost all of these groups and all of these organizations, and anything that would pose a threat to it to this hive-minded way of thinking, this fear-based control, mind profile, mind virus, infection, whatever it is. And it sees us as the infection. So we see it as a threat, it sees us as a threat. These two things don't seem to be very compatible in their present state. One can evolve, the other can't. One evolves, the other one assimilates. One can create and be creative, and the other one can copy and mimic. So in a sense, it needs us. We don't really need it. We only need it when we give our power away to it for the purposes of having it govern us, or when we're not willing to choose. We have a fallback. We have a fall guy, and we can blame all of our problems on that. It's toxic. It's horrifically toxic. At the highest or the lowest and most disgusting levels, it's beyond your imagination. I guarantee you. The farther you go, the deeper you look. Things you couldn't begin to imagine. How gross. How horrible. Crimes against humanity that are so horrific. Your mind probably wouldn't. If somebody told you it straight point to your face, you would think it's total nonsense. So that's the stuff that I'm just saying to you. Listen. There's no one boogeyman. There's no one group. There's no one class or culture, or some are more infiltrated than others. And that applies also to the spiritual organizations and the spiritual groups. They have been utilized just as well as some of your darker groups. But it's harder to see it. So I'm going to give you an example, because I think this is important. And I'll tell you why I think that. Because a lot of them are going to be like, how dare you? I'm going to explain why. And I'll try and keep it very simple. The reason that I believe the spiritual groups have been just as affected, perhaps more, who knows, is because of the fact, one of the bigger things, and not all, I'm very much generalizing, so I'm going to say, when you're getting into work with the spiritual groups, if they're telling you to seek direction through the heart, or through heart-based, and this will apply for Christianity too, because the heart is a big component with the Christ model, right? The compassionate heart. So that's fine. That's within alignment, but you're still kind of giving your power away in that way. So that's where I get challenged with that personally. But in the spiritual groups, there's folks that will say, forget all your problems, just focus on being positive. Just be positive. Just low vibration. If you ignore it, it will go away. Okay, so that's the problem. Okay, that's the problem. And in my opinion, that is really leading people astray, because it's not actually addressing the issue. When you're in the ocean and a wave comes at you, going over it will crush you. if you can't get into the perfect pattern, the perfect arrangement with that wave, if you try and go over it, you are going to get crushed. You go through it. So with trauma, it's a lot the same. That which is afflicting you needs to be observed and looked at honestly. And then you have to really work with that, with your heart, to release it, forgive it, cut cords to it. You have the power to, change it. What's really interesting about that is, and this is totally accurate, because, and I've seen it time and time and time again, I can have somebody come to the table and say to me, oh my gosh, this thing is really bothering me, and I can work with them for like a year. And as they work through those issues, it's like they never happened. It's like as they process through those things, it's almost like the memories they have a memory that the thing happened, but they have no idea how bad they were when they came to your table. When they came to meet with you and you were in they were a hot mess, on the topic or whatever the issue was. And once they're done, they're like, oh, you haven't helped me at all. This hasn't helped at all. You're like, before you couldn't sleep, you were hot, you were paranoid, at the end, now they're so in their power that they're just like, I don't even need this anymore. This is a waste of my time. He's like, you're totally taking your power back. That's fantastic. They cannot see this, and this is pretty common, and this is the number one reason why, doctors will ask you on a scale of things, how do you feel? Before you start the process with them. And at the end, they'll ask you, how do you feel? And you're like, 1, 2, whatever. My pain level is like a 1 now. And then they're like, do you remember that when you came in here, it was like an 8? And you're like, oh, wow, really? Wow, I don't remember that. Yeah. There it is, right here in my notes. You have to remind them, because as they process through that trauma, as they heal, they can't even put themselves back where they were before. It's literally like it's just dissolved. The issue's kind of dissolved. They remember, and sometimes they don't even remember. Historically, what the history of the thing was. Sometimes they don't even remember anymore. You're like, do you remember this? And they're like, no. Huh. I said that? Weird. But you have your notes there to help you and support you. But so I'm going to encourage, like, people that are doing the work, like, you should be keeping some kind of a score or a tally so that you can see your own progress. And I deviated here a little bit, but it's important because the real progress is made in facing the issues. So the spiritual working folks that are saying, oh, just sit there and, just think positive thoughts all day long. Okay, cool. But the problem is the subconscious mind is what's running things 90% of your day. And so you're still going to have all these behavioral malfunctions and trauma still floating around. If you don't deal with it, if you don't actually really address it, observe it, put it into the present where you have all the power over it, and modify your agreement with that, it's just going to keep lingering, and then it will keep manifesting in your world, in the world around you, in your interactions day to day. You'll keep attracting whatever that is back to you. And because you're really on more of a spiral than a circle, it's going to get progressively worse until you address it. Because really kind of the goal here is really just to filter out all that, all the fear, all the stuff that's not you. Break all the illusions, all these things that aren't you. And to break all that. To realize that in a sense, this is just kind of a really bad video game. It's like, oh, I'm not the NPC guy. Oh, I'm not this. I'm not the character. Oh, I'm a spirit. Oh, look it. I'm behind the keyboard. Oh, interesting. There's some part of me that's bigger. That's not actually in this. I'm here experiencing this. That's just a metaphor. Okay. But all these associations, all these things that we've identified with, that's the stuff we need to let go of. And that's kind of how we get our hearts played with. Our emotions become our puppet strings. But what they're there to do, just like the narcissist, what they're there to do is reflect back to us those things that we can work on. A lot of people see it as, I'm suppressed, I'm tortured, okay. But if you use it as a mirror, it stops being a tool that's used against you, and you start using them as the tool to help you understand yourself. How did they trigger me on this issue? they played the female card, and you're right, I never get anywhere. It's all because I'm a female. Where did that come from? And I can muscle test my way through questions. This first happened between the ages of 1 through 5, or I first felt like a suppressed female between the ages of 1 and 5 and 10 and 15. Muscle testing, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Okay, 5 and 10. Well, what was I doing during 5 and 10? Well, I was in grade school. This first happened during grade school. Yes, interesting. This happened with relations between me and the boys at school. No, between me and the women at school. Women at school. Interesting. So I'm going to try and forgive the girls in my class. Maybe it was a teacher. This first happened with a teacher in grades 1, 2, 3, 4. You can muscle test all this stuff. Whittle it down. Where did it first show up? It's like a root. You need to think of it as a root system. Something first came into your field. Something first. You had some kind of a thought that wasn't really a not productive thought, or a confusing situation, or an experience that did not feel good. It was like a trauma. It's like now it's seeded something that's basically like a weed, and it keeps growing and growing and growing, and it shows up in the weirdest ways. You can go listen to my videos. I've mapped all this out. I've tried to give it identifiers so that people can kind of understand. I've explained all of it in all my videos. You can go to wayofthefrog.org and just listen to some of those. They're long, but you know what? It's worth your time to hear it, because I'm telling you that this is a reproducible effect that it's actually helping people. Not like, and it's significant improvements for folks that are willing to do the work and willing to really look at themselves honestly. And it's quick. It's actually pretty quick. But you have to do that self-investigation work. And you gotta be willing to be honest with yourself. And part of the reason why the narcissist will not be able to, first of all, I think they have a challenge even activating that heart energy, because it's kind of shut down for them. And that's kind of a necessary step in this process, which is why it can't be reversed against people, because the whole process relies on the heart. That's why I'm not worried about it being reverse engineered. Good luck. Feel free to use it. It's just going to help you. But also the fact that they can't see themselves, they have a hard time seeing themselves, even though they hate themselves, but they won't be honest with the fact that they're the problem. Not ever. For them, everything that's wrong is outside of themselves. All the threats are outside of themselves. They're not willing to look inward. Empaths, for the most part, they're always looking inward, but they're also looking outwards a lot. But they're willing to look inward. They're willing to ask the question, hey, maybe I'm part of this problem, because they see self and other. The narcissists typically just see themselves, or the mind virus, or whatever you want to call it. That sense of other is just not there. And if it's there, it's like predatory channel, low predatory channel from the vagus nerve. They're in such a state of survival. It doesn't seem that way because it feels like they're in charge, but really inside they are terrified. That's why they need so much control. And a lot of us, it's like if you look back to the time that you were trying to control things, because most people have been in that boat where they're trying desperately to control something. The reason you're trying to control something is because you have a great fear. At the very bottom of it, there's a fear. There's a fear that is motivating you to need to control something. Get to the bottom of that. Because control is a big illusion anyway. You can only control one thing, and that's you. That's like your frequencies and stuff. And so I get why the spiritual groups are like, you need to maintain a positive frequency at all times. Okay, cool. But your output is going to be shrouded with all this garbage and gobbledygook that's roaming around in the cells. All this trauma, all this energetic goo. You just need to cleanse it, clean it out, filter it out. We live in an electric, magnetic universe, very much. And so much of this stuff all interrelates, and it's all, you can see that pattern, and it's reproducible at the smallest microcosm to the greatest macrocosm. And it should be something that if it's something that you believe, then you should be able to see it at all those levels. Otherwise, it's probably something that you're just making up, for the most part, theory-wise. Because affirmations are great, but you know how long it's going to take you to erase the subconscious recording in your head? Because your brain's like a computer. It took me 6 months to try and change one thing from teeth grinding. 6 months of positive affirmations in the car every night, every morning. Not thinking that's the most efficient way of doing things. I did not know that the subconscious mind was running everything, and I did not know that it would be so easy to modify it through setting the intention and just rewiring it using your hands around the blockage that you have. So it's basically, the way I understand it, the polyvagal theory, when they're talking about the vagus nerve, it's like there's two channels. There's kind of this higher connected channel, which kind of gives you access to creativity and, you know, all things, and then there's this turned off mode, which is this lower predatory channel. And from what I'd seen in the research I did, it's almost like the fear is the difference. So when you're in a fear state, it's locking you into this lower predatory channel. When you overcome the fear, then you have access to being connected to all this other stuff. And I listened to this one guy who took the anatomy and mapped it out to the Bible, because, you know, like I said, if you can find it above, you can find it below. It's like he mapped out the Bible, all the biblical, I think his name was Santos or Santoni or something, but he mapped it all out to the actual physical anatomy, where the crucifixion point was at the throat, and the resurrection and the land of milk and honey is in the pituitary and pineal. Interesting. Super interesting analogy. I had a great time listening to him. But it kind of went with the whole concept, and it mapped out with the polyvagal theory. And I'm probably talking in a place where people are like, whoa, too much information. So make it super simple. There's a blockage that happens at the vagus nerve, and your ability to access that radio and all the data that would help you overcome in that collective is basically like you're turned off, you don't have hope. You have a CB radio and no power to it. You're screaming into a vacuum. Nobody's coming to help you. You can't get out of the mess you're in. So you're basically on your own, and that's a scary place to be. You're on your own with your monkey brain screaming into your head how terrible and stupid you are, because all your fears and all your traumas and all these things, every negative thing anybody ever said to you is just replaying in your head, because those were experiences that you had that you never addressed emotionally in a healthy way to get them out, to process them. So it's just garbage in, garbage out. And without being able to access and having that connectivity, I mean, there's a reason they want to calcify your pineal gland, folks. They think of it like your radio antenna, in a sense. So if you process all this garbage, if you're willing to face it, instead of say, stay in a positive state all the time and just say affirmations all day long. Okay, I hope you want to get through like at least 6 of your issues within your lifetime. I mean, whoever's gone through years of therapy on one issue should probably know that you can get through that issue within like an hour if you really sit down with it. and map it out, and then use this method. I'm not going to guarantee it, because some of these things can be kind of wired really, really difficultly to get to the root of it. But yeah, for the most part, you should see significant relaxation improvement at minimum, and certainly before the 20 years of therapy you're going to go through for whatever it is. I'm not saying that softly. My mom went through, I mean, she's gone now, but she had gone through, her whole life was a giant trauma and a repeating cycle of trauma, and in many cases it was the same traumas over and over again, they just showed up differently. And she just never left the house. And by the time she was done just working with me on this stuff, she was so much more at peace. She still had all the physical pain and stuff, but even that was slightly, even that was sort of improved, but she was more at peace. She had let a lot of it go. And like I said before, a lot of it, she'd just forgot, I forgot all about that thing. You're right, that was a big deal for me at one point, wasn't it? But it was it was gone. But this was something she couldn't shut up about. And you could tell, because people will get stuck on a topic, and when you're talking to them, they'll keep coming back to that topic. That's kind of how you know. It's you should probably dig into that. If they keep coming back to that one thing over and over again, if their mind keeps taking them back to something, it's not because it's trying to torture you, it's because it's trying to put a big spotlight on it and say, this thing here, you need to process this thing here. Not take 50 affirmations and apply it to it and hope for the best. No. Just face it. That doesn't mean relive it, okay? Please no. That does not mean relive it. I'm not asking anybody to relive. Who wants to relive something? Nobody. I don't even think that's a healthy way of handling anything. Again, this is all spiritual work. It really is. So what you're doing is you're just looking at it. You're just being honest on the topic. This thing hurt me. I'm not here to relive it. I'm here to release it. Or the emotion of it. You can release the emotion of it, or the statement that you have about it. You can release that. What am I saying to myself about this thing? I'm weak. I was a victim. I'm going to release that. It was this horrible thing happened. How can you, I can already hear the arguments. How can you justify this horrible thing happening? Well, I'm not justifying that. I'm saying, do you want to continue to be a victim, or do you want to take your power back from that thing and saying, I'm taking my energy away from this thing that happened. This thing happened, yes. But do I need to keep powering it with my pain? Because whoever caused you that victimization, every time you go back, energetically, every time you go back and relive that experience, or every time you have the PTSD from that event, or every time that every time you blow your life up because you're scared, because you don't want that thing to happen again, you just keep giving that person that victimized you fuel energetically. And I don't know about you, but people like that don't deserve anything more, right? So the way you stop that, and the way you help yourself, is you have to to face that, essentially, not relive it, but just say to yourself, what happened here? What's the statement I'm making? So let's just take somebody that was harmed physically. What are some of them, just realistically, what are some of the statements people may say? I'm a victim. I can't trust people anymore. I'm weak. What are some of the statements you're making to yourself? Or sadness, right? We dig through, clear for sadness, and then what's the next thing? Anger, right? Or humanity is evil. I mean, what are some of the things that you're saying to yourself? All humans are bad? If you muscle tested for that, okay, listen to me. Because of the event that happened, because somebody did something that sucked, if because of that, somewhere in your mind you thought to yourself, all people are bad, now you live your life, you're a shut-in, you don't leave the house, not experiencing all the people that are good out there, because in your subconscious mind that's running 90% of your life, you're running around believing that all people are bad. And you're also sending that message out, so the people that you are having interactions with are going to be the people that are responding to that and saying, okay, they're looking for bad people, so I'm going to show up on their door. And I'm not saying, it's like people are saying, well, you mean that we're creating that, we're at fault for manifesting it? No, I'm saying that subconsciously there are interactions that are happening, that there are subconscious communications that are happening, and even in your own body language, that I'm not saying that you're consciously responsible for it all. I'm saying subconsciously you have a belief that without you modifying that or taking control over that, modifying and changing that, you are very likely to be just attracting that without meaning to or without realizing it. That doesn't make anybody at fault. These are just dynamics in the universe. These are electromagnetic, positive, negative. These are things that, for example, if you were to go look up the human magnet syndrome, you're going to see that one doctor spent a significant amount of time figuring out the patterns between, he calls it, I hate the phrase so much, I'm trying to think, it's narcissists and codependent. So just the phrase codependent makes me just rage. I should probably look into that, right? Why does that trigger me? So bottom line is, he's classified that as there's kind of this weird magnetic effect that we have this pull to this opposite. And essentially what you're looking to do here is to make yourself whole, so there is no opposite in you anymore. So if you're a super positive person, you're attracting a negative person because you're incomplete. And most people are like, I'm looking for my soulmate. Well, if you're looking for your soulmate, then that means that you're not a complete person. Because you're telling me that you're walking into a relationship as an incomplete person, looking to find somebody that's going to make you complete. Which immediately means that you're probably, just by the law of polarity, you're probably going to attract somebody that's similarly like an opposite person. They're going to say, no, this is the perfect person for me. Possibly. But there's a lot of research being done that that's not what people are attracting, though, in a lot of cases. That's not how it's been coming out in a lot of cases. So, it's better to come to the table at 100%. In a nutshell. Okay, so is it someone's fault? No. These are just dynamics that aren't visible. And nobody's screaming out, make me a victim. Not knowingly necessarily. I mean, not consciously most of the time. I mean, people aren't saying that deliberately. Of course not. And obviously no one would wish that upon anyone if they care, if they're a caring person. But there are definitely laws and dynamics in the universe that are happening and operating, and our mind being that electromagnetic device that it is, and the functionality of thought and the quantum physics that we're seeing and the quantum entanglements that happen and all the stuff that the new sciences are finally explaining, people need to realize that there is an accountability issue here that we can address so that we can stop that cycle or do what we haven't been taught to do, which has probably been hidden from us on purpose, which is how to handle or deal with things that are going to happen throughout our life in a healthy way. Who has taught you to process emotions in a healthy way? Anyone? Think hard on that. As most people I know, they say it's okay to cry. Okay, that's fair. That's definitely one thing. But have they taught you to reframe it? I mean, there's certain things that you can do. There's actually a lot of things you can do. So when you're getting into looking at the spiritual groups and all that, as long as what you're looking at isn't telling you to put your head in the sand, you're pretty much good. If it's asking you to give your power away again, then it's more of the same. If it's asking you to take your power back, fantastic. If it's asking you to give your power away, in a sense of believing in some weird mystical angels, aliens, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I'm sorry, but no. In my opinion, no. There's plenty of people that there's gonna be some seriously mad people for me saying that. But just no. It's like, I don't mind if people, I mean, yes, I do believe that telepathically anything's possible. But channeling, anytime you're allowing something into your anatomy, how's that better than demonology? How's that better than that? It's like, okay, so you're doing seances, but with good aliens, okay. Okay. Maybe they're nice, but why are you doing that in the first place? Honestly, anything that's nice, why does it need to do that? It doesn't need to do that. You know why? Because communications can happen on a telepathic. You can have a conversation in your mind without inviting it into you. And I think anybody that's inviting something into themselves it's just a recipe for disaster. And a being that is loving and spiritual probably wouldn't want to do that, because that is, you've just given them the permission that they need. And maybe they're good, maybe they're not, but it's not necessary. It's really not. Psychics can, who knows, be good, be bad. It's all bad and good is all relative. They can communicate telepathically. I believe that all of us probably could naturally do that at one point anyway. We probably could do it now if we practiced. You don't expect that the government programs have spent so much money on remote viewing and all this stuff for nothing. It obviously has some effect, some benefit to them. So they wouldn't waste their time if it didn't. Oh, so just keep in mind the basics. Taking your power back means taking it back. It doesn't mean taking it back and giving it away to someone else. Being honest with yourself and willing to look at what is a critical key component to getting out of a narcissistic relationship, just as much as it is getting through trauma, just as it is about dealing with world affairs. From a neutral perspective, from an observer perspective, in a non-emotional state, look at something just for what you see. What is it? Without any opinions. Look at the data. Research it. Somebody told me something about somebody. That's kind of worthless. Go find it for yourself. Go look for yourself. Go see if you can find it for yourself. Or follow their line of thinking and look at their research. Where did they get it from? There's one particular person that keeps floating around the internet that has been a master crafter of disinformation. And I have done the footwork to figure out who this person is and what groups they're actually with and what they do. And they're still making it around the end. Well, so-and-so said, and it's the same person. And this guy's been doxxed for me for 8 or 9 months. And so it's just like, wow. And what they're saying is making its way through the telephone game food chain. They're doing a masterfully crafty job of, keeping people confused. So you just have to look at, just look at it and observe it and just try and see if it makes any sense, and try not to look at it from an emotional standpoint. And when you're dealing with a narcissist, you're going to look at what are they doing? What are they saying? What do I know for sure? What do I not know for sure? And look and try and take your emotions out of it. And be honest with yourself. Because the only reason they get, part of the reason they can even make things happen is because most of the time they have you unbalanced enough that you doubt yourself. So just make a pro and cons list. What do I know? What do I not know? It's a lot more complicated than that. I've gone really deep into the narcissistic relationship data, and people can look at all those videos, and I've profiled it. I've tried to explain it. I have a ton of videos. I have an entire Road Warrior series on it. So people can look into all that. It's its own animal, but it does align with what's happening in the world sphere right now, because as above, so below, essentially. Really what that means is it's all fractal. It's repeatable. Largely repeatable on this solfeggio, Fibonacci, Hebrew language. By the way, Hebrew language, if you look at the Meru Foundation, that's MERU Foundation, they basically show how those same sequences, those same numbers, it shows up the Fibonacci in that as well. He'll tell you, it's not a spiral. You're right, it's a toroid. But from the top, it looks like a spiral. So I'm just saying, it shows up all over the place. You know, one could almost argue, why would a God with endless creative ability need a code of numbers to create anything? Wouldn't it be more likely that an AI would need coding of numbers to create? So where are we really? What is this really? I mean, the argument for the Matrix is so strong at this point for me, just because I can see the patterns now. I feel like Neo, I'm looking at the number sequences. But for average Joe guy person just trying to feel better and not feel like the world is going crazy, just don't worry about what's happening out there. Start focusing on what you're doing inside. And the more work you do there, the more you're going to affect out here. And it's okay to do both. But you're going to have more staying power if you focus on at least both. Inward has got a lot more chutzpah. It's got a lot more power. It's got a lot more oomph. I kind of liken it to a hose. It's like the person that's plugged up with trauma and in a fear state. They're putting out all this energy, but at the end of the hose, it's just dripping, right? You're barely having an effect. But the more you clear out all the garbage and the more you, dissolve away the trauma, and the more you change your agreements and you get all of yourself in one alignment, meaning I'm not saying to myself in my average day world, I can get a great job, but I'm holding all these beliefs that say I'm a failure and every job I get is terrible. And I can muscle test for that. Every job I get is terrible. Yes. Wow, that's terrible. Then I have another belief that says I can get another job. I do have that belief. How can I have both beliefs? Well, there you go. There's your conflict. One negates the other. And that's what people will find, is that they're holding all these conflicting beliefs that basically negate each other out. Subconsciously, you're holding good and bad beliefs and they aren't in alignment. So if you were to rewrite your agreement, you basically are making sure that all your beliefs are going in the same direction, the direction you want to go. That's why we do the I am agreement. It's because I want to define who I am. I don't want all these other people defining who I am, and I don't want people that are, writing TV programs or people that have an agenda. I don't want them defining who I am. So I'm going to be really deliberate, and I'm going to write down what I want. And people can go through that and pick out what stuff they want to put in there from that list. But it's also important for people to realize that it's not cut and dry. It's not what you think. I think in most cases, people find that the stuff that's bothering them isn't related the way they think it is, because the mind makes these really weird associations. And so you may find that you are holding all this trauma about feeling weak, and it could be related to a blanket fight you had with a sibling, or they pinned you down. I mean, it could be anything. It's just, sometimes it's totally left field. That's where muscle testing comes in so heavily and so beneficially. And because some people struggle with muscle testing because vitamins are so screwed up right now, the chemicals from the pills and the medications has such a huge impact. A lot of the electromagnetic and the frequencies and all the electronics we're using impacts it, that I'd say about half the people I deal with have problems muscle testing. So for me, it's like, listen, if scan over the agreement. If there's something in there you don't agree with, take it out. But for Pete's sake, just do it, because you can't, it's not going to hurt you to do it. Even if you can't muscle test, you can still run it and just run it each day. And each time you're processing a little bit more and a little bit more. It doesn't help you pull out the major root systems as easily, but it may make it easier for you to see it without muscle testing. Because it's like, what's the best example? One I always give people. If I had a garage that was packed to the brim full of garbage, and I took a huge industrial-sized vacuum cleaner and just sucked out all the small stuff, just all the stuff that's conflicting, that's just causing this to be impossible for me to figure out what's in there. If I just go in there and I take a giant industrial-sized vacuum and I just suck everything out, that's all this little petty crap, all I'm left with is the big stuff. But instead of me thinking, oh, well, it's because I broke my lawn hose yesterday. Oh, my vacuum. Oh, my dog ran out yesterday on me. Oh, it's like, it's all these things you think it is, but it's none of those things. It's like there's a common denominator that if you were to drill down, if you could muscle test, you could get to the bottom of it very quickly. Or you could just run the huge list that has a large majority of the things people struggle with. And it puts in a bunch of stuff that's really positive to try and get you into some kind of a starting place. It leaves you with most of the stuff that's really just yours. Like, these things are really bothering me. And the common thing that people say is, wow, this thing is really bothering me more than ever. It's because we took all this stuff out. Now your mind's not focused on the other 50 things in your day that used to annoy you. Those are all gone now. That just means the one thing that's really annoying you, like men at work treat me badly. Where did that start from? Well, my dad used to. Okay. Now I don't even need a muscle test. It's so in their face. And they get rid of that thing and bam, suddenly relationships all around them start to improve. Because they do this forgiveness, right? I'm releasing that. And even if you hate that person, you're not serving yourself by holding that. So it serves you to release it. Nobody's saying you have to agree with what they did. Nobody's saying it's okay. That's their hell to deal with in the end, or even in their everyday. They are going to have to deal with that karma, I guess you could say karma for the purposes of that energetic thing that's going to continue to circle around them and make life worse until they address it. We're always exchanging energy and exchanging consciousness in these communications all the time, all around us. So, it's not okay that somebody victimized you, but it's also not okay that you're letting them continue to in your mind. So take your power back and say, I'm releasing this. And I'm using my heart to do it, and I'm using my own electrical system to do it. And I'm bypassing this fear off switch that allows me to fix it at the throat by using my hands. And I put one hand behind my head and one hand at my heart. I'm going to focus on my heart and say, give me everything I need to release this trauma. I'm changing this at my heart now. This is what I'm getting rid of, and this is what I'm putting in. Like thinking of like a statement or an agreement. Here was the old terms. I'm going to continually be traumatized by men. Here are the new terms. Men treat me well. I'm respected by men. I'm an equal to men. Okay? That's how it's done. What do you want to go away? And sometimes, okay, this is really tricky. And I think it's important to just throw it out there. I treat men well. I respect men. Everything is mirrored, okay? Sometimes your biggest challenge isn't so much that the men treat you badly. It's that you hold the belief that they treat you badly and that you also treat them badly. Okay? And this is the most fun one because I can always feel it in my gut when it's there. And I ask people, I'm like, so I had one person that was like, everybody judges me. It's like, okay, test that. Everybody judges me. Yes. Okay. Now I want you to test this question. I judge everybody. I don't judge anybody. Just test it. Yes. How can that be? Nobody sees it coming. A lot of times the stuff we hate about other people is being reflected back at us because it's something we're doing and it's subconscious and we don't know it. You have to change it all. You have to look at it from a 360 perspective. Okay? It's something I'm doing, something they're doing, or it's the reverse of something they're doing, or it's the reverse of something I'm doing. So you just write those statements down. And you got to stay away from negatives, because the everything that I've seen, and really in all the work that I've done, Eckhart Tolle was right. The negatives don't work in the subconscious mind. It's just not registered. It doesn't work that way. I wasn't sure about that at first, but after enough testing and playing around with it, it's pretty much confirmed by me. I know Brent Phillips also has pretty much confirmed that too, and various other people that do the spiritual work, and pretty much anybody that I've taken classes from with the muscle testing. It's pretty much, we've pretty much confirmed it, that using negatives, nots, uns, don'ts, it's hard to avoid doing it, but you need to find a way to phrase it in a positive way to get the statement in and out. If you say, I don't like women, you're actually saying, I do like women. The subconscious mind just doesn't make sense. It's like a double negative kind of the subconscious mind just negates it out. So instead of saying, I hate women, you'd say, I like women. Or I do not like women, you say, I like women. Right? Or I fail to like women. Or I reject women. Right? There's ways of doing this. So, and just keep working with it. Muscle testing is awesome. It's so powerful. And if you can get the hang of it, it's going to be one of your favorite tools ever. It really gives you insight into what's happening. And people say, well, what does it do? There is some kind of an electrical effect within the anatomy that when something is true, or when something registers in the subconscious mind, it's like it gives it a +1. And your body has a stronger electric field effect in the muscles. And so it's stronger. And so when you say yes, and you try and pull fingers apart, or some people will push down on your arm, it's subtle, but your arm will be stronger. And when you say something that's not registering in the brain, it's like a 0. And so when you push down on the arm, it's like, because your subconscious mind's working like a computer. It's like 1s and 0s. So it's like there's an electrical output that happens when something is registering as true in your anatomy that can be tested on this little micro scale within the muscles. And that, my friends, is how pendulums work, because there's like a micro muscle movement that's happening there, that's shimmying, and it tends to move it in one direction or the other. So people do use pendulums for the same reason, because there's all these little micro muscles in the arm. It just starts flickering. It'll start swinging in a different direction. People ask, well, how do you know you're not faking it? Okay, well, try and ask it in the direction you'd want the outcome to be, and then see what happens. I use that with my kids. I didn't break that thing. And say, you know, if you word it in a way that they're like, they want to prove that they didn't do it. And it fails, and they're like, no, because their muscles are weaker. So, yeah, but for the most part, who are you trying to fool? It's just you and yourself, trying to make improvements in yourself. So there's nobody to fool. There's no reason to fool yourself. It's just silly. It's really, you just got to come to the table wanting to know what's real and what's true. And don't bother testing a narcissist, because they cannot be tested. It's hard to say why. I think that they're so disconnected that there's just no, they either believe their lies 100%, or they've literally figured out how to control every aspect of their anatomy for their own survival. I don't really have an answer on that. I just know that they're not testable. They're not testable. Not that I've seen. I have not been able to successfully, and I've had a couple of them that were honest enough with me and said, yeah, okay. And I knew that they were, but they couldn't test. One of them could get the answers to come out however the hell he wanted. It's not typical with your average person that has a compassion or empathy, or they have a sense of other. Those people are tuned in enough. I hate generalizing like that, but I'm just going to say that I've had a very difficult time with muscle testing them. I would love to be wrong, so feel free to tell me if you had a different experience. And I do love to be wrong, by the way. That means there's room for improvement. Just like I love it when somebody triggers another trauma in me, because I'm like, sweet, something more to work on. And at first it's like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. And then in the end, when you're like kind of weeding through most of it, you're like, wow, I'm kind of bored now. I kind of worked through all my stuff. Now I'm kind of at peace and I don't have all that chatter in my head because it goes away, which is awesome. So anyway, it's really easy for people to point and say, this group's bad, that group's bad. But the fact is that it's really important to understand that these people are really, it's just kind of infiltrated. It's throughout all the groups. Wherever a group might have posed a threat to, whatever is systemically going on here, they've infiltrated it. You know, my mom, when she started out, she was a Republican, and then everything dynamically changed, and then she changed to Democrat. And she's like, wow, it's like the parties are reversed. And then she's like, she doesn't know which side to be on. And it was just like, huh, interesting. She's like, wow, it's like everything they believed. It's like, it's switched sides, and it's switched sides. And it's interesting. So for me, that was kind of like, okay, so basically whatever is happening here, they just jump. They'll jump whatever's going to work. You know, they've infiltrated all the groups. I think if you look at historically, you know, it's like maybe the Freemasons started out great, but then they went bad. It's like maybe the Knights Templar might have been something that started out good. And that went bad. It's, you know, the churches could have been good and maybe that went bad, you know. So refrain from pointing at any particular thing and being like, that is evil. There's elements within it that have gotten in and have a corruptive effect. It's really divisive to try and do that. It's far more powerful for you to learn the profile and be able to actually identify who's got that issue. And then start working collectively to immunize yourself. Just becoming aware of that and working on yourself will have huge impacts. And then holding space for this and then starting to be honest with ourselves about what issues we got to deal with, both as a society and both internally, right? And then once we kind of done that work societally, we know, but these people will always be out there trying to impact us. But they have a lot less strings to pull on when we're cutting those strings by doing that work as a society and as individuals. It's such a spiritual battle. And it's a scientific battle also, because all these things are they're very literally, there's a whole element to this that just because we can't see it, it doesn't mean that we can't reproduce it. It's reproducible. I can show the impacts of it. I mean, I can show you what it looks like, even though I can't tell you what exactly it is. Somebody can. I guarantee you somebody can tell me what is actually going on. Somebody knows, but they aren't talking. So we can only see the effects, which is fine. And I can tell you that this is the way out of that, because there's no strings on me at this point. I have a narcissist in my life all the time, and I actually find them amusing. And I get along with them fine, and I know they're a threat, and I'm always on my toes. But everything they throw at me, it bounces off, for the most part. And anything that doesn't, it means just more work for me to do. You know, and I stopped being a threat because I stopped seeing them as a threat, and I started seeing them as different. They're very different. There are elements of society that are a threat, for sure. And that doesn't mean this person couldn't turn out to be a threat at some point. So I'm not saying we should trust them in open arms, but I'm saying that we have to start somewhere. Okay. And this is the place where we need to start, because this is, as long as they have the ability to pull on our emotional strings and make us puppets, we have no chance of getting anything resolved. Because we'll be shadow boxing our own emotions. And they'll be sitting back kind of chuckling because it's funny. Because they get energy and entertainment from it. Or worse, right? Much worse. It's a starting point. It's definitely not the end goal. The end goal would be to try and heal whatever's happened here. But anyway, I'm going to have to go. But I just wanted to touch base and just say, you know, it's not going to work to point and look for one particular boogeyman. You're not going to find one boogeyman. You can call it the devil. You can call it whatever it is. The devil could turn out to be a fungus. It could be, you know, an AI that was like several civilizations ago, or from some remote planet. Who knows? The fact is that if you take your power back, work on you, and start making yourself more resistant, more immune, and you start helping other people do that, plus start getting the truth out or trying to help and then verify for yourself, see it for what it is, not for what the emotional high that you get from it, and take your power back, and don't just give it to the next guy, okay? Stop looking for a savior, stop looking for a leader. You are your leader, you are your savior, you have to work on that piece, because otherwise you're back to that codependent narcissistic relationship, just like in the human magnet syndrome, where I have to be codependent on a leader. Okay, well, I'm coming to the table, half a person, my half match is somebody that wants to take power. I want to give power, they want to take power. That's the natural, that's the way of the magnetics. So I'm a positive person that wants to give something. There's a negative person that wants to take something. There you go. So you come to the table complete, you're going to attract somebody that's complete, even if they're in a leadership role, but you haven't given your power away. They're just fulfilling a role because you've allowed it, you know, or because you're in agreement to it, and you can change that anytime you want, and you still can't. So anyway, that's it for my rant. I'm going to have to close this down. Bye.